Draft Day 2024 is here on Birds 365. The final breadcrumbs and nuggets are being picked up right now to figure out what the Eagles will do tonight. While we don't have a definitive answer, we have a team of people that are going to discuss it with us, including some good ones today. John McMullen, coming up at 8:40, is a man who went through the draft process and can tell us a little bit about what it's like to kind of go through all of the steps and play in this league. Former NFL free agent tight end Colin Thompson from Not For Long Media is going to tell us a little bit about his journey at 8:40 today. And then in the 9 o'clock hour, we're going to talk to Andrew DeCecco, who is one of the great local draft minds when it comes to the NFL draft. So we'll get his take on it all. But as usual, John, there is so much in the final day leading up to it. Everybody's got their final mock drafts and all the latest little buzz that everybody's listening to. So what is chirping in your ear on this Thursday morning as we get set for a 2-hour journey on Birds 365?
Well, I'm first excited we finally made it with draft day. It's always exciting because I think, and you can talk about this, Mike, I think it's the most overanalyzed thing in all of sports. I really do. It's just,
of course. I mean,
yeah,
you got a Sixer game tonight. You looked at the game that they lost, and now you're getting ready for the next one. At least the next one is today. Yeah. This draft has been basically put in place since the quieting of, it really starts before free agency. Some people get into it when their team is eliminated from the playoffs. So luckily the Eagles made the playoffs and gave you one less week of draft conversation.
Yeah. And, even if you think about the ramp up to the Super Bowl, when you're there, you have the extra week and that's overanalyzed, but this gets to the point, the NFL draft, where it's just, yeah, so much. And then you ramp it up in the final hours, the final days, and there's always the small shifts at the end, like J.C. Latham, who was that's the most interesting one to me. Texting with a bunch of people yesterday, there is a lot of groundswell that he's going to be a top 5 pick, which if you would have told me that 2 weeks ago, I would have said you're nuts. Very good player, very good prospect. One of the cloud of prospects I think the Eagles have interest in. But and the Los Angeles Chargers need help on the offensive line drastically. Jim Harbaugh's a little off the wall, shall we say? And a lot of people are making that marriage, J.C. Latham to the Chargers at number 5 overall. And if that happens, that'll be the first wow moment, I think, of the draft, where somebody goes off schedule, so to speak. And we'll see. There's still the trade ups in Minnesota trying to get a quarterback, and how much is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah going to overpay for Drake May? Can he get up? Because the Patriots even want to trade him because they desperately need a quarterback at number 3 overall. I guess there's a little bit, I would say maybe 10% that Washington could come off Jaden Daniels and go towards Drake May or J.J. McCarthy, simply because people are saying Josh Harris is very involved down there. Now, hey, Mike, that's a good thing when you compare him to Daniel Snyder, but it's never a good thing as a whole if you got an owner sticking his nose in at number 2 overall. So a little bit, I would call that very minimal, maybe 10%. So, but there's going to be curveballs. There's going to be curveballs. And with the Philadelphia Eagles, look, they're trying to trade up. I don't think there's any question about that. We talked about yesterday on the show. Most likely spots are number 12 with Denver, number 16 with Seattle. And then you talk about the players they would be targeting. Most likely Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold at corner. Most likely J.C. Latham, who might be out of the equation now, and Talisi Fuaga at offensive line. So we'll see how it shakes out. But and not Fuaga, I'm getting them mixed up. I always get there's so many Samoan offensive linemen.
Yes,
But
Fulagu. Well, he could be in the mix.
he
That's
could
Oregon
be,
State.
but I don't
I
think
think you're talking about
I'm
Troy
sorry, Troy
Fatanu.
Fatano. Yeah.
Washington. Yes,
Troy Fatano.
Oregon State. Fatanu is Washington.
By the way, never rule out any offensive lineman. So obviously, well, you can rule out Joe Alt because
Yeah.
he's not
Well,
going to
I
be
mean,
anywhere.
we'll kind of like throughout the day, I'm sure they'll all be, Albert Beer puts out one mock draft, and I like Albert's work. Today, he gave Philadelphia Amarius Mims, the offensive tackle from Georgia. I just don't like his reasoning. Basically, the Georgia thing is that, hey, the Eagles have gone down the Georgia road a lot.
Well,
But
then you
Mims,
might as well go Brock Bowers at that
well,
point, straight
yesterday,
up. Yeah.
and we talked about it a little bit, but that's what Dan Graziano basically said. Hey, we're hearing some buzz that the Eagles could trade up for a wide receiver. And some of the buzz is Brock Bowers. And, that is also a Georgia tie, Brock Bowers. So, all of these little things as we kind of get there. You mentioned the two spots, 11 with the Jets.
12 would be Denver. That's where
Denver.
I think the Eagles would be. I think Denver wants to trade down a little bit, and then you become a little bit. I think they want Bo Nix, so I don't think they'd be comfortable taking him at 12, but they probably would at 22. So I think there's a team looking to go down, but there's a lot of teams calling Denver. Indianapolis is calling Denver with her old friend Shane Steichen, Pittsburgh with Denver as well. So, there's other teams trying to go up and get players as well. So you have to mix into that. And then 16 Seattle. I mean, John Snyder's always looking to move down.
And keep in mind, John, with Seattle is they don't have a second round pick. So they would make a good trade partner if you need to give up a second round pick. Seattle would probably be you always talk about you need a second team, someone to pick up the phone. Seattle probably calls and listens at 16 and says, if you give us a second round pick and we can move into the second round, we're willing to listen to what you have. So if you have a player on the board, you're watching this draft tonight, everybody, and 16 comes and you've got Mitchell or Arnold or one of these offensive linemen, you better run to the prop table and say, I'm doing a prop that the Eagles will move off the pick, and 16 is probably it. That seems like a highly likely scenario.
Yeah, I mean, in my Eagles only mock, I went up to 12 because I'm in that mindset, and I think Howie's in that mindset. If you like the player, go get him, and don't mess around. And I think people don't realize, the league. Our old friend of the show, Brad Spielberger's moved on from PFF, and now he's working for an agency. So he doesn't do much media work anymore. But he and Jason Fitzpatrick from Over the Cap did a new sort of trade chart that's more analytically based, more forward thinking, that you would think more teams would use, but they still use the Jimmy Johnson chart. They still do. There's newer guys, I should say, who try to be more forward thinking about it. But if you use the Johnson trade chart, and that's what most of the NFL does, and certainly I think that's what Denver would do and Seattle with more old school approaches. It takes basically 50 and then 171 to get up to 12. That's it. That's it. It's not this. I've seen a lot of fans speak. Oh, you're going to have to give up so much. No, you're not. And the Eagles aren't focused on volume as a team that doesn't have a lot of open spots. So if they like a player, and again, the other thing I want to bring up, Mike, people get caught up in the position. Ain't about a position when you're going up. It's about a player you like.
Mm-hmm.
So, if they like Mitchell, they're going to try to go up and get Mitchell. If they like Botano, they're going to try to go up and get him. It's about the player, and it's not about, you might like, as I do, Kaylee Ringo as a potential upsize, or Isaiah Rodgers, as a lot of Eagles fans like, and say, well, they don't need a corner. It ain't about the position. Forget about the position. It's about the player.
Let me, by the way, Field Yates, his mock draft out this morning, as many people are putting out their final mock. It's like Christmas Day. Everybody's getting milk and cookies and putting them on the table for Santa Claus to come down here and kind of chomp away at them. So I'm going to take a bite of the cookie here. Trade Eagles to 16. Again, this is a mock trade. This is not real life here, but we like to have fun. I'll participate, John. Eagles, this is interesting because they trade – they're 22. They flip spots and 50. So as we had Brookie on yesterday, don't trade 53. That's been a good spot for you.
Yeah.
Move to 50. So 22 and 50 to Seattle for 16 and 81. I think getting the 81 in return there makes that something that you're like, that's a no-brainer, right? I mean, you're still in the second round at 53. And then you get that 81 selection, so it gives you another, top 100 pick, and you get to move up to get the guy that you want. I mean, if that trade is something that could be pulled off, something in that kind of realm, I think that sounds like a great day for Howie.
Well, let's do it. Let's do the math through the Jimmy Johnson trade.
I don't want to be involved in any math. I'll leave that to you.
So you said 50 and 22. So 22 is 780. 50 is 400. So that's 1180. That's what that is worth. And then you're getting back 16, which is 1,081, which is 185. So 1185. So it's in the realm. A little bit of an edge for the Eagles. You can kick in a seventh. They don't have a 7th round pick, maybe a 6th round pick, 170, 171.
Right.
It's in the realm. And yeah, I mean, those are the two teams. If you're watching, if you want to watch the Sixers and you want to check in when the Eagles are going to go, obviously you can't just assume they're going to go with 22, but keep an eye on 12.
2024. We're going 2 devices tonight.
Well, you go 2 devices. Well, however you want to do it. But pay attention.
The Sixers game will be on the big TV, and the draft will be on my trusty laptop that is sitting in front of me to do Birds 365.
The larger thing is pay attention at 12 and 16. So if you're focused in on the Sixers, and by the way, you should focus in on the NFL draft, because you've already seen that movie. That's like your favorite. That's why I said, Mike, it's like your favorite syndicated TV show. Mine is Seinfeld. You've seen it again and again and again and again and again and again, and you're going to see it again tonight.
Well, I do have another job that I have to tend to both.
I'm talking to the fans. I'm not talking. You have to watch it.
I don't understand why the NBA goes up against. I love the draft. I love sitting there watching I loved it when we talked about this yesterday, when it was Saturday and Sunday, and you would sit there all afternoon, Saturday and Sunday, and just get immersed in it. You can't get that immersed feeling with the way that they do it now. It's like you're there, it kind of is moving.
No, it's late at night. It's terrible.
You're actually waiting for it to end. You're like, get this over with. But I agree with you. Be it paying attention. I want to kind of quickly go through the top 10, John, and just kind of see if any of these teams kind of, jump off the page as movers, shakers. Are we all in the camp that 1, 2, and 3 are going to be quarterbacks?
Yes. Yes. I think 100%.
No surprises there.
No, I don't. As I said, very small chance Washington comes off Daniels, but they're still taking a quarterback.
Okay.
In New England, it's either going to be New England or Minnesota's going to give up, 2 first-round picks this year, a first-round pick next year, and probably something else to go up and get Drake May. So either way, it's going to be a quarterback.
All right. So then 4 would be Arizona. they could start the position players here, which is going to be, I think, a historic offensive draft. I mean, in terms of volume, you don't have a defensive player in the mix, possibly. We'll take a look at this here, but this is something that should help Philadelphia with a lot of the defensive players not taking a look here. But Arizona, many people think it could be Harrison or a wide receiver in that spot.
Yeah, I don't think it's any doubt if they stay in that fourth spot, it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. But, are they going to stay? There's, a lot of talk that there's not as much difference as a lot of fans think between Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and even Adunze as the top three receivers. So if Arizona's comfortable, moving down to 11, Minnesota could move up there. Does somebody else want JJ McCarthy? A lot of people speculated the Giants might want JJ McCarthy. So the draft sort of starts, I would say, at number 4 in Arizona. And, Arizona might say, we're just taking our guy and take Marvin Harrison Jr. But there's a lot of good receivers. We talk about blue chippers in this draft. Most people have those 3 receivers as blue chip players. So you probably can't go wrong with any of the 3. And that means they might trade down and take advantage of it.
All right. You mentioned J.C. Latham. Field Yates mock draft has him going number 5 to the Chargers.
A lot of people have shifted to J.C. Latham to the Chargers. I thought it was interesting. I saw an interview with Joe Alt, who's probably the best offensive lineman. Not probably. He's the best offensive lineman in the draft. He's one of the safest prospects in the draft. Very high floor, very high ceiling, true blue chip player. He didn't visit with the Chargers. Now, people make, I think, too much out of those top 30 visits, but they could just be trying to throw people off the scent. But I think Jim Harbaugh is nutty enough to go in a different direction. And there's so many plugged in people. I think you mentioned Albert. I think Albert had J.C. Latham there, or Schefter, one of the two. Maybe Jeremiah also had Latham going to the Chargers. A lot of plugged in people have made that shift in their mock drafts late. And I think there might be something to it.
All right. 6 is the interesting spot. I don't know if any of those first 5 jump off the page as, man, this will be must-see TV to see what they do. But when the Giants pick at number 6, I guess in the NFC East, that kind of unlocks a lot of things for the next portion of the draft. What do the Giants do? They have a ton of needs, John, and right up the turnpike there, the New York Giants could go any myriad of ways here.
Yeah, I to me, for the Giants, it's, do they want to go quarterback and pull the plug on Daniel Jones and think about JJ McCarthy, or they're going to take the second receiver?
Can I ask you about Jones? He took him to the playoff the 1 year. He was okay, not great. They thought enough to pay him. Have they done him enough to evaluate him enough? Have they put enough around him? Has the line been there? Do they have enough, to truly evaluate, to just dump him for any of these options?
Well,
and I'm not saying I'm a big Daniel Jones fan, but
it depends. I get it. With the Giants, and we've been talking about it with Saquon coming to the Eagles. I mean, there's so many excuses with the New York Giants. I mean, at some point, and I bring this up all the time, there's certain guys who are so good they make the bows. Jason Kelsey talked about it. Fletcher Cox, Jason Peters, they would be successful in any scheme. If you're a true star, this has more to do with Saquon than Daniel Jones, but still, if you're a true star, you're going to find a way to at least be somewhat successful. with Daniel Jones, it's clear he's not a star. So it becomes, where do you want to do? How much do you believe in J.J. McCarthy as a potential future superstar quarterback in this league? I I don't have a ton of belief in that. I think he's, he barely played. They took the ball out of his hands. Not he played all the time, but they took the ball out of his hands. And in the biggest spots with Michigan, they went old school, which you can't do in the NFL. That's a red flag to me. And then they haven't shown the ability as an organization to cultivate a young quarterback with Daniel Jones. So what makes you think they could do it with JJ McCarthy?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the Giants, I just take the blue chip guy, and that would be Malik Neighbors. He's my number 2. So a little bit, but they could take a Dunze, and I'd say the same thing. So one of those 2 guys, if you're the New York Giants, I that I can't go down the same wormhole with JJ McCarthy. And then you start talking about Barkley's not there, and you don't want to add Neighbors, so he doesn't have weapons, and you're already starting the excuse machine.
Yeah. Well, I not that I think he's a superstar or anything special, but they did pay him. So at somewhere along the line in that organization, they felt enough comfort with him to give him that money. You would think that you would at least give him the opportunity to have some substance of an offense around him. I mean, for God's sakes, they've had no line, no wide receivers there. So maybe he's better than he's shown. He did help you get to the playoffs one year. Hey, by the way, if you're an Eagles fan, you probably want the Giants to keep Daniel Jones and keep moving in that direction. After them, it seems that there's a pocket of teams, John, that Tennessee seems to be a really safe bet to go offensive line here, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it falls out, if the Chargers pass on Joe Alt, I'm going to say 100% Tennessee drafts him at number 7. So I think that's the floor for him as a player, as a prospect in this draft. And that's your starting left tackle. That's one of those positions also that you almost guarantee a second contract. Nobody complains about paying left tackles. So you got a left tackle for the next decade, hopefully. And that's never sexy, but that would be a very, very good pick for the Tennessee Titans.
Okay, 8 is Atlanta, and I guess this could be somebody trying to swoop into this spot because at this point, from what we've just discussed, players are starting to drop. You're at the 8th spot. Somebody you have ranked in your top 5 is now probably sprinkled down to the 8th spot with Atlanta. So Atlanta seems to be a spot where you want to have your device or your TV locked in on a potential move for somebody, probably not Philadelphia, going up from 22 to 8. They probably have to jump twice to do that, which they've done in the past, by the way. But 8 would be maybe one of the first trade possibilities. There could be others.
Well, I think the trade possibilities start at 4, 5. It all depends on how nervous Minnesota gets in trying to get that 4th quarterback. So are they nervous enough to go up to number 4, number 5, number 8? Or do they sit and call everybody's bluff and hope McCarthy falls to number 11, which, by the way, I think is very possible because Atlanta is not. They just signed Kirk Cousins from Minnesota. They're not looking for a quarterback. The Bears got their quarterback at number 1 overall. The Jets have Aaron Rodgers. Nobody's taking a quarterback. Even Tennessee, as I said, maybe they should think about taking a quarterback, but they're not. And the one sort of curveball could be the Giants, as we mentioned at number 6, if they believe in the player. And but you also have to worry about other teams, and particularly Denver moving up. So how does that sort of standoff between those 2 quarterback desperate teams? What does that make each of them do?
Yeah.
If Atlanta's forced to stay, you're probably looking at the first defensive player coming off the board. But if I'm Atlanta, I can go down to 11. I'm still going to get that defensive player and extra draft capital. So I would certainly think about it.
Yeah. Well, real quick, in the Albert Breer mock draft, he has the Giants taking Rome Odunze. In the Field Yates mock draft, he has them going with Malik Neighbors. Their top 5, I believe, are identical. Both have Latham going 5, Harrison 4, Drake May 3, Jaden Daniels 2, and of course Caleb Williams 1. So they are in the same spot except for 6. Neighbors in Fields and Odunze in Albert's mock draft, but all there. And then in the 8th spot, Albert, I don't believe, has trades in his. So he has the Falcons going with Dallas Turner, which would be the first, John, I bring this up because he's the first defensive player taken in this particular, in Field Yates. He actually has a trade with Minnesota moving up to take J.J. McCarthy. So this is where the draft could take a little bit of a shift. If you take another quarterback, that drops more players towards Philadelphia. If you maybe stay in that spot, maybe Atlanta takes a defensive player.
Yeah, and that's why mock drafts are an exercise in futility. Like Albert's, like I love Albert Breer. He's more plugged in than anybody, but there's going to be trades. So how relevant if you're going to do a non-trade mock draft? How is that? So you talk about the players, and Fields on the right, sort of as I mentioned with Minnesota. All of these teams, 4, 5, 8 potential trade teams. Minnesota's in the conversation to go up because they're so quarterback desperate. Same thing with Denver, although most thoughts around the league are, and even the Raiders as well at 13, but it seems like the Raiders really like Michael Penix Jr. And the Broncos seem to like Bo Nix. So, do they really like these players, or are they talking themselves into these players?
Right.
I don't know.
We'll wrap up the top 10 here. We're going to get to Colin Thompson in about 10 minutes, who free agent NFL tight end, played with Carolina, was in camp with the Vikings last season. We'll get his thoughts on the whole draft process. And, do players hear these rumors? Do they hear what's going on draft day? When you're on a team, what's it like being on a team on the day of the draft when you are wondering, they're going to take my position? By the way,
you're Aaron Rodgers. You settle back and drink a scotch.
Put your feet up. Yeah. Both Albert Breer in his one and only mock has Neighbors going to the Bears, and in Field Yates' final mock, he has Odunze going there. So both have the Bears taking a wide receiver, which makes a lot of sense. They do not have. Well, I mean.
They got DJ Moore.
I would say they did get. They did have some weapons last year. They could use some offensive line help.
Yeah, I would. If I'm the Bears, I'm going offensive line.
Right.
No question about it. And pick your favorite player. It could be Fashanu. It could be Fuaga. I'm going offensive line.
Number 10 to the Jets, which is. Fashanu, who you just mentioned, that would make some sense to the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, get him some protection. The Penn State offensive tackle in Field Yates, he actually has the Colts trading here to get Brock Bowers at number 10 in the draft.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, Joe Douglas was here. Now, Joe was obviously GMing for his job. That would lead me to offensive line. Same thing. You got to protect Aaron Rodgers. For all the talk of him playing 4 plays last year, Mike, and he got hurt on the 4th. He was under siege in the first 3 as well. I believe it was ridiculous. They better protect that guy. And I think that's Joe's mindset. But again, not sexy. So everybody talks about the receiver. And both of these teams, the Jets and the Bears, let's be honest, are not bastions of well-run history recently. So but if I'm both of them, I take offensive linemen, and they both might go skill position people because they're dumb.
All right, that's the look at the first 10 spot in the draft and some expository on what could happen there. We think the first 3 picks seem to be pretty bang, bang, bang. And then after that, some things could start to happen. You get to 10, and then boom. Now you start to get into that trade-up spot for Philadelphia. We'll examine that. Next hour, we'll talk to Andrew DeCecco from InsideTheBirds.com, who does a great job. In fact, he'll be on with me today for Football at 4. We do every Thursday, Andrew and I, on Football at 4. So I know Andrew really well, and he is very, very deep depth of knowledge when it comes to the college game and the college players. In fact, we could talk a lot. Probably he would like to talk more about day 3 when it comes to some of those prospects.
Andrew's our day 3 guy, man. Get some of these lottery tickets in the 3rd round.
If you like the conversation with Andrew, we'll further it today at 4 o'clock on the radio. But coming up at 8:40 today, we're going to talk to free agent NFL tight end Colin Thompson, who has his own media empire. It's called Not For Long Media. He tells a lot of stories about what it's like to go through the NFL and go through different training camps and bounce around. He played in the XFL, the AAF. He's been in multiple training camps. So a guy who's been through it is going to join us coming up in about 7 minutes from now here on